Salutations from space and aloha from Earth, friends. It is 11:33 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesday, Miraculous Mercury's Day. So time for Storytelling Hour. It's nice to be here. It's nice to be sitting down for this. Last week, the internet went out, and so I was on a stroll in the park and through the streets. And the week before, I was on a plane, and the week before, on a plane. So it's the first time I've gotten to do this in a bit. And I'm glad that some of you are here joining me live. Greetings, discerning light. We'd love to know where you're beaming in from. Hello, Nancy. I want to speak today about Jupiter square Saturn. We should speak about Jupiter into Cancer and Saturn into Aries and Neptune into Aries, right? In this year of these great changes, this time of these great changes, if the tropical signs are real and I know them to be, then we've had some significant shifts and are staged to have some more, right? So let us review Pluto into the sign of Aquarius. And maybe for the sake of the science, we should do this on a chart wheel together. Why not? So for us to do this together, why don't we take our feet off of the ground here in Berkeley, California, and go with more of a directional global zodiac image. The North Pole of Earth leans forever towards the Tropic of Cancer on the ecliptic, 0 tropical Capricorn, the South Pole towards 0, North 0 Cancer, South 0 Capricorn, like so many sacred systems of ancient wisdom traditions. The tropical zodiac is directionally aligned. And so we can go with this so-called natural zodiac or 0 Aries wheel, because this point where we find Neptune and Saturn now, this point, this cusp of Pisces and Aries in the Earth zodiac, the tropical zodiac, is due east of the center of the Earth, and therefore works in many ways like a global ascendant. So let me get back to that. We see the moon aligning at this time in fullness, right? Moon opposite the sun, in the galactic center. And I'll get back to that too, because I want to tell you about a course that is just about ready to come out of the vision world and into reality. Is this the spawning of the Age of Aquarius, a course about the zodiacs and the alignment of the terrestrial and celestial gears to bring us through the turning of the ages, and how this is the time that has long been prophesized. Anyway, back to where we are. Let's push the Pluto ingress any sign button, and we will remember that it was some years ago when Pluto first made his way into the sign of Aquarius. I'm actually going to rewind before then and just show you that in 1995, Pluto came into Sagittarius and then went back into Scorpio for some unfinished business here in 1995 on 420 bro, and then back into Sagittarius November 10th of that year. And Pluto would transit Sagittarius until ingressing Capricorn first January 25th 2008, back into Sagittarius for some unfinished business in June of that year, and then into Capricorn November 26, 2008, and would transit Capricorn all the way until March 23rd, 2023, right? So that was Pluto ingress Aquarius. Then Pluto retrograde back into Capricorn for some unfinished business from June of 23 until returning to Aquarius January 24, back into Capricorn again, September 24, and then into Aquarius to stay November 19th, 2024. And we'll transit through Aquarius all the way until Pluto ingress Pisces in 2043, right? So here we are today, Pluto at 3.5 degrees Aquarius in retrograde, and Pluto will soon station direct. That's happening on October 13th, 2025, here at 1.5 degrees Aquarius, right? So Pluto has made this shift. And Pluto, because Pluto moves so slowly, right? Like, it doesn't happen every day. We just reviewed Pluto from Scorpio into Sagittarius, from Sagittarius into Capricorn. This 2006, 7, 8 global financial crisis thing, Pluto into Aquarius, right? And how this transition has been happening like 2023 to 2024. But now Pluto committed to this journey through tropical Aquarius, because it's going to be an important part of our sharing today, and also because it will be very much linked to the spawning of the Aquarian age, kind of. I want to rewind to December solstice of 2020, when Jupiter conjoined Saturn. And that was here at the very first degree of Aquarius, right? So in recent times, Pluto has been transiting this place where Jupiter and Saturn last met. And Jupiter and Saturn, they conjoin about every 20 years. There's a very important shift in their energetic conjoinings that's been happening really since 1981, which is that after about 200 years of Jupiter and Saturn meeting in Earth signs, we shift to a new elemental paradigm of Jupiter and Saturn conjoining in air signs. And many astrologers were hollering about this December 21st, 2020 Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the first degree of tropical Aquarius, about that time being this kind of beginning of the air sign transits, but really they began in 1981, where Jupiter and Saturn met 3 times in tropical Libra. But since that time, in the year 2000, they had a meeting in Taurus, right? So it's either like Libra was a foreshadowing of the air epoch to come, or Taurus in 2000 was this kind of remembrance of the Earth conjunctions, Earth sign conjunctions of our past. Regardless, we've been in this transformational time of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions, moving from Earth signs to air signs. And now with this Aquarius Jupiter-Saturn conjunction of December solstice 2020, those beings are committed to air element sign conjunctions for the rest of our lives. And that'll be true for our kids too. It's about 200 years where Jupiter and Saturn commit themselves elementally. So what is this shift from the earth to the air? We're going to retrograde back to that question after we just play with indications of other significant changes. Now, I could bring in Haumea and Maki Maki and other slow-moving beings, trans-Neptunian beings like Pluto, and we would see that other great kind of sign changes are happening with these slow-moving bodies in that frame too. But I'm going to stick with what's on your screen and just honor that, Neptune, having spent so long in Pisces, is now making this change. Now, importantly, Neptune will station retrograde here on July 4th, wave a flag, I guess, and then head back into Pisces for some unfinished business on October 22nd. right after that time of Pluto station. But Neptune will then be in Pisces, will station direct in Pisces for the final time, December 10th of this year of 2025, if you're into that whole Gregorian trip. And then Neptune into Aries, crossing the gateway again, January 26, 2026. And committed to the Aries journey until Neptune ingresses Taurus 2038. Let's rewind time a bit and look at Neptune's Pisces ingress. So even back here, this is Neptune Aquarius. Neptune first came into Aquarius in 1998, danced back into Capricorn, then back into Aquarius that year, and then transit Aquarius from 98 until the Pisces ingress 2011, and fully committing Neptune to Pisces in 2012, which for me is fascinating. Neptune coming into Pisces February 3rd, 2012, right? And so Neptune in Pisces between that time and Neptune's first of these Aries ingress, March 30th, 2025, or maybe we'd even say until Neptune going to finish some unfinished business in Pisces will commit itself to Aries January 26, 2026. So February 2012 to January 26. And we see in that about 14 years' time, Neptune will not spend the same amount of years through every sign because orbits are not circular, they are elliptical. However, Neptune is much more consistent than Pluto because Pluto has an extremely eccentrical orbit, very stretched elliptical orbit. It's one of the reasons why the white coats have deemed Pluto now a dwarf planet, or at least different than the ones that stop at Neptune, according to the current astronomical view. Astrologers might sing a different tale since we know the powers of a Pluto transit. But there is also something of that, quote unquote, demotion of Pluto in 2005 that also opened eyes to many of these other trans-Neptunian beings like Haumea, Makemake, Eris, Sedna, But I'm going to stick with the ones that we had on the screen. So Neptune in Pisces, where, modern astrology kind of suggests Neptune is most at home. I'm personally a bit more of a traditionalist in this idea of the planetary domiciles, as they were called in the tradition, that Jupiter is the landlord of Pisces, that's Jupiter's nocturnal sign, where Sagittarius is Jupiter's diurnal sign, right? A story of water and fire, which is an intriguing thing to explore, and so we shall. But I would never deny that there's something incredibly Piscean about Neptune and something incredibly Neptunian about Pisces. I imagine for those of you who have toured Neptune and explored the Pisces Sea, that you would certainly agree. So Neptune in Pisces, maybe this is the way that Neptune was designed to express. Is that something that we want? No or yes? Both. I have to say that, maybe I did this backwards, because looking at Neptune fully committing to Pisces in February of 2012, that's like my sobriety date, which is January 6, 2012. So did I get that wrong? Well, I did accidentally find sobriety through plant medicine work. So, hopefully I was still doing the Pisces thing. And I have to say, in my own life at that time, and I wonder what was up with you in 2012. But I was really tripping on the 2012 thing. right? In a sense, through the research of Mayan calendrical systems, since the math suggested that it would be the solstice, the Capricorn solstice, the December solstice 2012, which would end the 13 Baktuns of the long count of the Mayan calendar, the long period that began, if the math was correct, at a time that others call August of 3114 BC, right? So this time of 5,000 plus years, which some were saying would be the end of the world, but most, I think, in this kind of, to compare it to the tropical zodiac, this circle of spirit, this, I would suggest, most elegant solar calendar that ever was, right? Like any circles, it's hard to define some beginning, which point on the circumference of the circle is the beginning of the circumference of the circle. But in the tropical zodiac, perhaps this is best described by this point that is east of Earth center, this Pisces Aries cusp, for it works like a global ascendant. And it's also this place where the plane of the year, the ecliptic, passes over the plane of the day, the equator, right? It's a very important, prime fiducial, to use that term. But linking the year and the day, linking the watery seas of Pisces and the spark of the Aries design, this Eastern energy, which we get to explore in the daily experience, right, as most kind of magically expressed through the liminal time called sunrise, taking us from night to day and such. And over the course of the year, at this equinox time, the sun on the cross at Passover. And there's ways where we can take that and explore its importance in the great year of time too. So if there was a beginning of the tropical zodiac, this is the candidate, right? And in so many ways, this like end of the circle is the beginning of the end of the beginning of the end of the beginning again. And that's really what I came into in regards of this great flip of the 13 Baktun long count calendar that some math suggested would be December 21st, 2012, to express that in Gregorian terms. Other math suggested it would go down in October of 2011 on a day that actually I was at Stonehenge quite intently. And then for the December 21st, 2012 happening, I was at Machu Picchu, preparing for the beginning of the end of the beginning again. But I'm just remembering personally that at that time when Neptune kind of fully committed to Pisces in February of 2012, I was very mystically intrigued and confused by this end of the world kind of thing. And for many of those of us who really dove deep, our worlds did end. We see here a quote of "It's the end of the world as we know it," right? For me, my old world, which at that time looked like an engineering job that had nothing to do with me, and also like a stage musician, which involved a lot of late night experiences, like it ended. And my world as an astrologer and as more of a commitment to the mystical path really kind of came in. So for me, it was definitely 2012, one of these ends of the world as I know it. I mean, in a sense, though, I was in Machu Picchu. And I mean, interestingly, for me, it was the only Christmas a few days later that I had spent both as a summer solstice because I was in Peru, but also away from my family. It was helpful for me that there was another traveler from Seattle where I resided who was in Peru at the time, and we had like a Christmas dinner together and some other adventures. But it was important for me to commit at that time personally to some like rebirth work in the jungle and some exploration of these sacred sites in the sacred valley of Peru. So what about you? What was up with you in 2012? Did you buy in or give your energy to this idea of the end of the beginning of the end again? I'm seeing 2012 Neptune went over my ascendant, and I lived out some amazingly delusional relationships. Intriguing. At the time, for me, with Gemini on the rise in my nativity, Jupiter was transiting my ascendant. I had this quite magical experience with Jupiter from the jungles of Peru, who helped answer the question for me of how in the heavens are you in Gemini when I clearly see you in the horns of the bull, even though the bull's horns are pointing down towards the ground here in the southern hemisphere where I'm used to them pointing up, and what's going on? And I received this crazy, I don't know, felt like 4-hour download that started with sit down boy and ended with now go spread the word. And by the way, a bunch of the words that I was told to spread will be in this coming spawning of the Age of Aquarius or Galactic alignment or turning of the ages course. And many of you here I see are members of the Constellations community, the School of Astrology's membership space, which y'all can find out more about at geminibrett.com/constellations if you are not, or go to geminibrett.com and click the Constellations community tab. I just want to mention that with all courses that I teach, including this one that's about ready to come forth from the dream and into the manifest world, I'm not exactly sure when, but the the signs of the time are saying soon. Yeah, with all my courses, folks who are members of Constellations will receive like a really significant discount for this one. I think enough to kind of pay for a year of membership. So it's a good time to sign up for a month and take advantage of that. If you want to sign up, go check it out. Use the coupon code STARFAM, like Star Family. Love you. And you'll receive a significant discount to sign up either monthly or yearly. We, Anna, my partner Scorpiana, and I teach a class there every week together once and separate thrice. And then we have wonderful community discussions happening. One led on Friday mornings by Carolyn Link, who's wonderful at linking us together, and another by Winter Weldon, who reminds us, don't forget to like this video, and also, I think, offers an interesting image of elemental happening expressed through alchemical glyphs in this comment that is currently on your screen. And so we will rewind there. I want to honor what Layla writes here, which is Jupiter is in Gemini, not Cancer, which is true constellationally and true also if we look in the heavenly gears of sidereal zodiacs. I will also say, however, constellational zodiacs and sidereal zodiacs are entirely arbitrary. It doesn't mean they're wrong, right? A constellational zodiac who gets to connect the dots. And as I love to teach, while stars are celestial, constellations are entirely terrestrial. So it'll actually be a huge part of this course, which is to show you the powers of 3 different zodiacal cosmologies. one constellational, right? But even there in the constellational zodiac, are there 12 signs? Or are there 13? I wonder if, Layla, if you're coming from that camp, because often we will find people like making adamant statements like this: Jupiter is in Gemini, not Cancer. Could use a comma in there. Who are coming from that space. And so looking at the Ophiuchus thing, and just looking at constellational zodiacs, like the stars are my dear friends. I'm going out tonight to explore them, by the way. And for any of you who are here in the Bay Area of California, I just want to share this with you, which is a very out of focus image I'm just seeing. Oh, weird. Huh. The, hold on a second. Weird. Winter, have you noticed that the NCGR website appears super strange right now? Anyway, if you head to ncgrsanfrancisco.org, and I was just there earlier today. Yeah, I guess there's just kind of a blown up image that gets a little out of bounds. But you're going to see this. If you're in the Bay Area of California, I'm holding a stargazing happening tonight. And I've been in starvation in the Berkeley fog in recent days. And the weather app says it's clearing up. I'm actually seeing sunlight and some shadows for the first time since I've returned from Hawaii. And so hopefully this holds, and the weather app suggests it will, because tonight, June 11th, Wednesday, Miraculous 2025, I'm going to hold this stargazing gathering. It's totally free. If you're around, come hang out. It's going to start pretty late because we're going to watch the sunset on the solstice stone at the Cesar Chavez Memorial Solar Calendar. And then we are going to watch an out of bounds moonrise. And I'll be speaking about working with calendar sites like stone circles, many of them, not all of them, certainly this one, which has equinox stones and solstice stones, and how the solstice sun sets on the northern stone only when the sun shines above the Tropic of Cancer. So the tropical zodiac is not about constellations. It is about the tropics. Greek tropikos means turnaround. Every year, the sun on its path, the ecliptic, which crosses the equator at the equinoxes, reaches his southern extreme at the Tropic of Capricorn, and then passes over the equator, the plane of day, at Aries equinox, right? So spring equinox for the northern hemisphere as the sun is springing up towards us, but autumn equinox or fall equinox for the southern hemisphere as the sun is then falling away from those down under, right? And then the sun reaches its northern extreme every year above Earth's Tropic of Cancer, right? So when we hear things like Jupiter is in Gemini now, well, why don't we call this the Tropic of Gemini? And I don't want to spend too much more time on that today because that really wants to have pace, and so much of the magical mystery doors opened with keys, like the Cancer glyph, is the sun, like the crab, each year stopping solstice to turn around tropicos at the northern and southern extremes on the horizon. And the moon does this every month, but the moon can also go out of bounds north of the Tropic of Cancer, south of the Tropic of Capricorn. And why I'm holding this gathering here in the Bay Area tonight. And I'll try to get some video and share some of that maybe in Storytelling Hour next week. Why tonight? Like Wednesday, it's Mercury's day. Mercury brought us astrology, good. but also because after we watch the sun set on the solstice stone, and of course it's not solstice yet, we're 10 days before sun's ingress tropical Cancer, not constellational crab, but tropical Cancer. The Tropic of Cancer, literally the Tropic of Cancer, 23.5 degrees north of Earth's equator, the tilt angle. Because when the sun each year stops, right, solstice, to turn around and go the other way, he's got to first slow down, right, for the kickflip, right? So if you swum laps in the pool, you know that in the middle of the lane, you're moving fastest one direction or the other. That's the equinoxes, right? But at the kickflips, you literally stop, right? So solstice. So we'll see the sun setting on the solstice stone, even though still like a decan of Gemini to travel until the Tropic of Cancer, the northern bound, is reached by the light as he does each year. But tonight we'll also watch a moon rise significantly out of bounds. So we'll get to see, clouds allowing, and right now it's looking good. I see a few of you here who I know will be joining me tonight. The moon will rise south of the solstice stone where the sun never can. And by the way, like, you can learn to see this in the stars. So constellational zodiac helps us like know where the sign cusps are. But the tropics, the out of bounds, straight and crooked signs, antischia, which you might know as antitia. There's so much more. Signs of short and long ascension, contrantitia. That's all tropical zodiac. Like so much of the advancement that of astrologers have given to math, like spherical trigonometry and more, it's born through the awareness of the changing of shadow throughout the course of the year and the horizon calendar and many other things we'll speak about at the site tonight. And again, I'll try to record some so I can bring that to those of you like Ellie and across the pond or wherever you are. So the constellational zodiac, again, I'm not saying in any regard it's wrong. It's a beautiful thing, but also who gets to connect the dots? So what in the Western tradition is known as the Scorpion is known in Australia, where that constellation flies super high, as a parrot. Literally flies overhead in some places in Australia. So you can see how original people there would describe those stars as something that flies super high. In Ontario, modern day name, right? The Ojibwe people saw that scorpion as Nanibozo, like the trickster god. And there's an island from Thunder Bay where the scorpion walks that land every night. Singer never even rises. It's so low from that far north on Earth in our day and age. And they knew that as this being. In Hawaii, the scorpion is the fish hook of Maui. So understand that constellations are entirely terrestrial, right? The constellations as we see them, or we could connect dots. You can't do that from Vega, right? And it's also so terrestrial that it's completely dependent upon culture, tradition. And many astrologers now teach these 88 accepted constellations, which were defined in ancient times called 1929. All right, like the official canon of constellations by the International Astronomical Union, who, by the way, cut the Scorpion's heart from the ecliptic plane, from the path of the sun. Sorry, I just got a text message and I need to cast a chart. And then brought in this idea that Ophiuchus, who's a powerful being, is a zodiac constellation, which many now are trying to claim is some ancient thing, and I've never found an ancient record that suggests the sitting gods, as perhaps Ophiuchus was known by the Babylonians, or perhaps Imhotep, which might be suggested at the Temple of Hathor as an image of connecting those dots, had anything to do with the zodiac path. Sidereal zodiacs, star-based zodiacs, also entirely arbitrary. Because what we do with the star-based zodiac, a sidereal zodiac, is we divide the sun's path, and for the most part that of the planets, because our solar system is relatively flat, we divide that into 12 equal slices of 30 degrees, which the constellations that embrace the path of the sun certainly do not. Right? Like the great examples there is that the demure priestess, and I use that term rather than Virgo. I like to use terms like priestess, scales, scorpion, archer for constellations, and words like Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius for signs, because I know them to be very different things. And I'm very grateful to my first teacher, Daniel Jamario, for like offering that to me. So it's a little bit less confusing for me to talk about constellational priestess and tropical Virgo or sidereal Virgo, which it's those things are different too. It gets really confusing when we start playing with three different zodiacs. But it's also quite worthy for us to do, because that's when we can see the meshing of the terrestrial and celestial gears that help us understand where we are in the great year, where we are in the great turning of the ages. And amazingly, and why this signs of the time now are saying like, I've got to launch this course, is Saturn and Neptune meet in the early degree of Aries, which we often, and history, like, well, the mystery history has suggested we track that point of the tropical zodiac, the east point of Earth, this point of Earth, which, because north leans towards Cancer, south leans towards Capricorn, like literally the Tropic of Capricorn, the Tropic of Cancer, the southern and northern bounds of the zodiac respectively, there is a global east point, which is this tropical, not constellational, not sidereal Pisces Aries cusp. And as we watch that point precess through the constellations, or perhaps precess through the sidereal signs over the great year of about 26,000 years, then we can see where we are in the great cycle of time, in which astrological month. Like, is this the spawning of the age of Aquarius? And why would I say spawning rather than dawning? And there's a very important mystery hint embedded in that way. So the constellations, which are so beautiful and have so much story to share, powerful, but I encourage us to explore them through many lenses, not just through kind of the Greco-Roman exchange that happened in the Hellenistic times between, the Alexandrian cultures and previous star lores coming from Greece and also coming from the Middle East, as we call it today, Babylon and other places in that zone, information that was kind of coming in and out of India as well, right? Like there is this great, powerful time at the advent of quote unquote Western astrology in the Hellenistic age, which probably was also the beginning of the tropical zodiac. However, when we look back to the Mula Pin, which many see as kind of the proto-zodiac, right, the oldest record that we have of the stars and the path of the moon from the Chaldean astrologers, who we often call Babylonian, we find that also in the Mula Pin, they were tracking the shadow length of a gnomon or fixed stick throughout the course of the year. And that's tropical calendrical system, right? And by the way, tonight at Cesar Chavez Memorial Solar Calendar at the Berkeley Marina, we will also explore not only the solstice stones and how we can work with a horizon calendar to know where the sun is in the signs, to know where the other planets like Jupiter is in the signs, but also to know when planets are out of bounds, like the moon will rise tonight. But we'll also see a meridian calendar, which is a shadow stick that helps us understand with the length of the midday shadow where the sun is in the signs of time throughout the course of the year. Sidereal zodiacs also key to these mysteries. But as I said before, also, and this isn't me saying they're wrong, arbitrary, because what happens with the sidereal zodiac, and let me retrograde back to this, the mirror priestess, okay, the priestess of the heavens, you say the Virgo constellation, is 47 degrees in arc, or 42 to 47, depending on whose, dot connection and boundary divisions you choose. And choose your own, right? But anyway, let's say 47 degrees of arc. That's more than a sign and a half, Jack, right? Like that's a huge thing. And if you get to know that constellation in the sky and the Fishes constellation on the other side, you'll get to see these star groups that are so much larger than a 30-degree slice, a so-called equal part, to use the terminology from the Hellenistic astronomer Geminos, who was approaching this problem 2,000 years ago, and certainly was not alone in doing this. So, many will say this, like, well, the signs don't match the constellations. Is this new problem? We've been literally wrestling with it for millennia. Yeah. And Gemini says there's two types of zodiacs, or really says there's two kinds of signs. There's constellation signs that consist of stars and not the same amount of stars, and they don't connect dots that are all the same size as the other one. So again, like Priestess, 47 degrees of arc, more than a sign and a half, or the Mighty Ram, 15 degrees, like half a sign's worth of sky. So what do, right? You either have a clock face where the dashes are like not equal, which would suck. Sorry. That's a constellational zodiac. Again, powerful because it can help us tune into the tales, the starry stories that, for me, participate in so many ways with our energetic experience as earthlings. So I find it, for example, quite important that, as Layla says, Jupiter is in, I'll call it, in the twins. Like Jupiter right now, and I'll show you an image of this, is being kicked by the foot of the mortal twin, his kind of son, Castor. Let's go to the wonderful Stellarium astronomy software for this moment. And you get to see Jupiter here on the hand of the high man, Orion, which is maybe the most interesting thing of our day and age, which is at the Tropic of Cancer, and thanks to Stellarium for also adding these glyphs for example, 0 Aries, which is certainly not constellational Ram, but this place where the ecliptic, the plane of the year, norths its way across the equator, the plane of the day. Only the tropical zodiac is non-arbitrary. Like this point is due east of the center of Earth. This point is the place on the sun's path towards which the north pole of Earth, the sword of our stone, the world tree, eternally leans. Okay, not where it is in the stars, just 0 Cancer, right? So of the constellational cosmology, of the sidereal cosmology, where we pick a star and then divide by 12 equal slices from there, but which star or which point, right? Arbitrary. The tropical zodiac is the only one that's not arbitrary. It is a very important thing that in our day and age, like let me show you, for example, 2,000 years ago, you're going to see that 0 Cancer then was here between the twins and the crab. Right. And many people will tell you, by the way, that back then it was with the crab. No, it wasn't. Maybe we can go, 1,000 years before them. And you can see here's like 1000 BC. Here's like 500 BC. At that point, the Tropic of Cancer was precessing through the crab. And where is it today? And the answer is here on the hand of the high man, to whisper from the prophetic tradition of a land we now call Ireland, and being kicked by Castor, the mortal of the twins, his brother Polydeuces, a son of Jupiter, right? But Castor, a son of the mortal king of Sparta, Tyndareus, according to the traditions from that land. Well, if we go to like the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota tradition, we are going to see that what we call the twins, they know is the bear's den. And as above, so below. This is on Earth in the Black Hills as the bear's den, a place that's sadly known by too many as Devil's Tower. All right. So is Jupiter in the twins? Constellationally, yes. In fact, just entering the twins. Let's go through months. July, August, September, and you can really see how Jupiter's spending time through the twins here, and will not actually reach the crab because Jupiter will, of course, retrograde for some time after all of that, right? There's Jupiter into the crab. That's not happening until 2026. So many constellationalists will consider that Jupiter in Cancer. But those of us who have learned to know the very real and elegant and beautiful and directional truth of the tropical zodiac will see Mars at this time entering tropical Cancer here, where Stellarium astronomy software even shows this glyph tropical Cancer. And so maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but maybe not, because as I talk about Jupiter coming into Cancer now, let's take the supersize away so we can see how that has just gone down. And Saturn coming into Aries now, right? And I do have to supersize these beings to find Neptune nearby, right? Well, this is happening at such an important and powerful place of the zodiac. Series as well, you know. Why? Because it's this place, one of the two, an equinox point, which is the intersection of the planes of year, ecliptic, and the plane of day, the equator, the plane of our daily rotation. And only the tropical zodiac references not only the one circle of the sun's path, and for the most part that of the planets, because while they all have their own orbital course, our solar system is relatively flat, right? Another reason of Pluto's demotion, by the way, because Pluto will distance himself by 17 degrees north or south of the path of the sun. But only the tropical zodiac of these cosmologies, constellational, sidereal, and tropical, also brings in the equatorial plane. Now, I should say that doesn't mean that like sidereal astrology, or for those who are practicing with like a constellational astrology, as some do in modern times, like there's some 13 sign astrologers out there, right? I wonder, Layla, if you are one, or if you're into a sidereal zodiac or what. But if you're also working with houses, you're also working with the equator, whether you know it or not. I mean, your house divisions might not bring the equator in, but the plane of Earth's daily rotation, which brings the sun and the moon and the planets and the stars of the zodiac through the houses above and below the ground, right? Like that's an equatorial motion, right? So you don't have to define your zodiac using both of the circles of year, ecliptic and day equator, for the equator to come into play. But I'm happy to be with a zodiac that is configured to the year and the day alike. Sky Gypsy tells us that they received an unexpected $1 million. I'm guessing in 2012. I guess I asked that question. Awesome. Right on. I'd love to see how that looks in your chart. And I'd love to also know how you did with that unexpected $1 million and what it looks like now and all those things. All right, so let's retrograde back. I very much diverged from the path we were on, but it's also a place that we're going to get back to. And you've probably heard me whisper this Gemini mantra before, which is these many branches I'm called to climb all emanate from the same trunk. And in my personal opinion, where I know that redundancy is built into every great space mission, we could really never spend enough time with the strange design of these three zodiacal cosmologies: constellational, sidereal, 12 equal parts, and tropical, directional, Earth's heart, and the world tree, right? Our rotational axis, which defines the cardinal directions and also defines the tropical zodiac signs. This point where the North Pole eternally leans is the Gemini Cancer cusp, which is always above the Tropic of Cancer, though that's not always 23.5 degrees north of the equator, because this tilt angle changes over, if the modern astronomers are correct, a 44,000 year cycle called nutation. Anyway, the 26,000 year cycle of the axial precession, and therefore precession of the zodiac, right? Really precession of the equinoxes, the solstices, and every other tropical zodiac through the stars, or the procession or the forward movement of the stars and constellations through the tropical signs. That is the mechanism for the turning of the ages. So if you really want to address this riddle of when is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, we have to understand the terrestrial framework of the tropical zodiac, at least of the four cardinal points, which are the solstice and equinox cusps, and the celestial framework of either a constellational zodiac, but again, because the constellations, which embrace the ecliptic plane, vary significantly in size, those would be like dashes or markers on a clock face that are different distances apart. And so the 12th parts, or a sidereal star-based zodiac, right, then offers another 12-spoked wheel or 12-toothed gear with which the earthly gear of the tropical 12 interfaces, right? And so we end up really kind of coming into a system of 12 12s and 144. And I think we hear whispers of this, by the way, in the Rig Veda, which tells us the 12-spoked wheel of order rolls around and around the heavens and never ages, O Agni. But later speaks about two birds in the tree, and one eats of the fruit and the other is free to roam. And I think that's either sidereal and tropical, or tropical and sidereal, respectively. And all of that, plus some of the mysteries of Char Cathedral, which came in during a reading earlier today to remind me to retrograde back to a bunch of work I had done there, and some of the strange zodiac code and other places on Earth that help us understand more, whether chiseled in stone or written into the mystical words of the fairy tales that speak about this importance of our time now. I think any mystic would find a way to massage the earth and heaven marriage into such an expression that says you've incarnated at the time, right? So perhaps this is like just an arrogance of the age, but I don't think it's true, because very importantly, and this is kind of the gig, and Jupiter reminds us of this now, and tonight the moon. So actually, let me go first to tonight. In our day and age, the Tropic of Capricorn, so where the south pole of Earth leans, it has now precessed to this galactic gateway. So you see the galactic center here, all right? And actually, let me just go now, and we'll just head somewhere on the other side of the world. So we can see that actually at this time, the moon is currently occulting the galactic center. I'm going to go to yesterday and show you that the moon then, let's just focus here and rewind time, occulted Antares, the heart of the scorpion. And I just show this as a statement of how ridiculous that when I look at the boundary divisions for these constellations as defined by the International Astronomical Union in 1929, this is what I was sharing before, they cut the scorpion's heart away from the ecliptic plane. And so if we want to see the ecliptic star of the constellation that they suggest lives at these degrees of the zodiac, we have to go all the way up here to Psyche, who's like 11 and a half degrees north of the zodiac and not nearly as bright as the 14th brightest star of our sky, Antares, and one of the four royal stars of the Persian tradition, the heart of the scorpion, which is only 5 degrees south, really 4.5 degrees south of the ecliptic, and one of the brightest stars in the sky. So close to the ecliptic that depending on where the lunar nodes are, that star can literally be occulted from our view, right? And this happened yesterday. And so I just want to show that as kind of exhibit Antares for how ridiculous these boundaries divisions are. Now, I would say just over here, not so much, because the scorpion's stinger is quite far from the path of the sun. And so for me to kind of know where the moon is, like let's just go again now, it's really helpful to consider the knee of Ophiuchus. And there's this amazing mystery here in this space, which is where the ecliptic, the plane of the year, right, the heart of the zodiac intersects the Milky Way band, right? Like the plane of our galaxy, this galactic cross, right? We have the stinger of the scorpion, the arrow of the archer, and the knee of the healer, Ophiuchus, triangulating the galactic center, right, which we say resides at 27 degrees tropical Sagittarius. That's what happens when you draw a perpendicular line from the galactic center up to the ecliptic plane. All right, but the galactic center, like the scorpion's heart, is about 5 degrees south of the ecliptic. And when we are in lunar standstill times, as we are now, that means it can be occulted by the moon, which I just can't tell you. Like, there's not enough words to tell you how amazingly super cool this is. And by the way, depending on where on Earth you're looking from, that's happening tonight or today. Every year and forever, if the modern astronomy is right, and who's to say it certainly is, the moon will occult the galactic center every 18.6 years. In our day and age, that's happening with the moon's transition from tropical Sagittarius to tropical Capricorn, because in 1998, the Tropic of Capricorn precessed across this galactic cross. And that's a huge and important part of the turning of the ages tradition that's often not seen in another, 216 years. Let's go to 20 to 33. That Tropic of Capricorn will then align to the place where the galactic center projects to, right? So we won't teach galactic center as 27 Sagittarius, then we'll teach it as 0 Capricorn. For those of us who are tuned to the truth that the tropical zodiac is not symbolic or not lost because its signs aren't aligned to the constellations, but rather the zodiac of Earth. So at this point, the south pole of Earth will be leaning as close as it ever can towards the galactic center. But I just want to go back to today, because I'll say that galactic center was, radio telescope discovered in like the 70s. what we can see so clearly with our eyes if we get away from the city lights is this beautiful river of stars and this place where the Ouroboros, the serpent, bites its own tail, right? We see this cross. And again, it perfected in 1998. Bam, where the Tropic of Capricorn precessed to this galactic plane, but it's very much alive in our day and age as it was in 2012. Let's actually look at December solstice 2012 and seek the sun. And we will find that at that time, the sun was at this galactic cross. And John Major Jenkins, the wonderful Mayan calendar researcher, galactic alignment researcher, may he rest in peace, or I should say, I more travel interestingly in wherever he journeys now. Really helped us see how this was a deep part of the Mayan cosmology and how it's also shown in many of the traditions from around the world. And I would say when we look to the other side, we find also here where the Tropic of Capricorn in the clouds of heaven and the right hand of the mighty one, to quote from, well, Christ. Because in our day and age, we see, let's just go to now and put our feet on the ground. And then we'll head over to the place where the zodiac is highest above the northern hemisphere Earth, and that's called the Tropic of Cancer, because it's closest to us in the northern hemisphere sky. And then let's just move through some days and we'll put the sun on the cross at the hand of the high man, right? Which is happening in our day and age at the glory of the king, or the height of the light, near Father's Day, interestingly, in some countries. All right, so many ways to play, and I've already revealed more than I mean to today, but let me go back to today and just share with how important I feel it clearly is to know that Saturn and Neptune ingressing tropical Aries means that they are at this crossing of the planes of year and day that is due east of the center of the earth. And at that point is now moving through this fish's head, would suggest to many who see only constellationally that we are in the age of Pisces. And that it'll be like 1,000 years still before we see that Aries point precessing into the water bearer's stream. And depending on whose boundary divisions we use, should we choose the IAU, we could even go to like 2025 and see that Aries point has a long way to go before it changes quote unquote signs. But when we start tuning into the different ayam namshas, or boundary divisions for sidereal zodiacs, okay, again, plural, because a sidereal zodiac really is arbitrary, right? We pick a star and start dividing into 12s from there. Well, which star? If we picked Regulus, the lion's heart, we get a very different story than if we pick Spica, the shaft of wheat that the priestess holds, or use the eye of the bull to define 15 sidereal Taurus, as some do. And on we go. What I mean to say today is this. And I guess instead of getting back to the chart and looking at all the timelines, we know Pluto changing signs if we honor tropical degrees. And I think you can tell by now that I sure as heck do. Pluto changing signs in our time. Neptune changing signs in our time. How is it that they're doing this simultaneously? And many of you have seen that most of the charts you see for people born in recent decades shows a Neptune-Pluto sextile. How in the heavens could these two planets, who have a rhythm like this, Neptune, Pluto, Neptune, Neptune, Plutune, right? Pluto takes like 200. Oh, you know what? That's not the rhythm. My bad. That's the Uranus-Neptune rhythm, right? Pluto, like 248 years around the ecliptic. Uranus, like 84 years around. Neptune, what is it, 165? There's 3 Neptunes and 2 Plutos. By the way, these mysteries are also revealed in the astronomy of Mercury. And discerning light reminds us that Neptune has the word tune in it, right? So let's tune in and feel that synchronicity, right? So if we get 2 Plutos, right? So 2 times 248 years is 496 years. We divide that by 3 and we get 165. So thank you, calculator. Yeah, so the Neptune transit of the zodiac, 165 years, right? So 3 Neptunes. Like waltzing, right? In the time that we get 2 Plutos. Pluto, Neptune. Oh no, we need another word for Neptune. Neptune dreams, right? Whatever. Usually I'm at like Mercury and Hermes. And maybe more of that in this course too. But how is it that if Neptune, generally speaking, is moving like 150 times the pace of Pluto, how could they stay sextile forever? And the answer is ellipticals, the amazing elliptical eccentric orbit of Pluto. So like some of you were born with Pluto actually closer to Earth than Neptune, which is a trip, and really about the same distance. And as that happens in Pluto's strange elliptical orbit, Pluto being the same distance from the sun as Neptune means they're moving at the same pace for a period of time. And we've been in that period of time for a long time. So how amazing that they're shifting signs at the same time. But let's like look back and see if it's been like that, right? And look back how far? Oh, to 2012, right? So let's go to Neptune ingress Pisces back then. And we'll see that Pluto had already ingressed Capricorn. That was like 2006, right? So that really wasn't happening at the same time. We did get, in some regards, the Uranus-Pluto squares of 2012 to 2015, right? So they were kind of sign cusp E, if you will. Let's go back to Neptune ingress Aquarius, where we find Pluto then at 7 or even earlier degrees. 7 of Sagittarius, right? So in other words, right, like though they've been holding, generally speaking, this sextile shape for some time, let's actually ask the computer to tell us about Neptune sextile Pluto, right? There's one in 86, Capricorn, Neptune, Pluto, and Scorpio. We can go back. There's a lot of these things, right? I'm back in 79 now with Sagittarius, Neptune, sextile, Libra, Pluto. Like we can do that for some time. I'm back in 56 now with Neptune then in Libra, sextile, Leo, Pluto. Like this has been happening for a long, long time. Let's crack to now and see as we move forward in time that we get a bunch more of these sextiles. It looks like maybe 2032 is the last of them in modern times, with Neptune then in Aries and Pluto in Aquarius, right? So this is like the last opportunity for them to have a sextile on sign cusps. Not only that, back to the charts. But now we also have, and we have had symmetrically, Neptune at the midpoint of Uranus and Pluto, but perhaps this becomes most interesting when Uranus also changes signs this year. So check out how at that time, this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, though they're so close, their exact conjunction will not happen until 2026 in tropical Aries, near this east point of Earth. When we go to the nerd dial and we talk to Neptune at that time, we're going to see that Neptune is within a degree and Saturn even closer to the exact Uranus-Pluto midpoint. Okay, in the Uranus-Neptune-Pluto midpoint structure is like a 500-year thing, but for that to be in an expression of a Ptolemaic aspect, in other words, the trine, I call it a sexy trine, when you have a trine like Uranus in Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius, right? Trine with the planet on the sextiles in between, right? Some call it the sextile fan, Aquarius, Aries, Gemini. I like to call it sexy trine, right? You get the trine with the sextile thing happening here. How amazing for us to be in this midpoint picture, this expression of symmetrical alignment, at least in their ecliptic or zodiac positions, in zodiacal positions of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, at sign cusps. It's one thing for it to be a sexy trine. It's another thing for that sexy trine to be at the cusp of tropical Capricorn Aquarius, to be at the cusp, such an important cusp, perhaps the beginning of the end of the beginning of the circle, tropical Pisces Aries, at the cusp of tropical Taurus Gemini, where the Pleiades now reside. So maybe back to the stellarium we go. Although, you know what, I'm going to quit it and just start again because it's going to help me reset some happenings. Let's just go to this time of Uranus ingressed Gemini, which will first happen July 7th, 2025. Why not trace that a little bit too? Back into Taurus for some unfinished business in November, and then committing to Gemini here in April of 2026. But I want to go to the first ingresses where we really do see this midpoint picture so close to sign cusps. July 7th, 2025, coming soon to a theater called You. Let's paint this picture in Stellarium astronomy software. And we'll get to see when we type into the space-time machine, July, what was it, 7th? 7-7, that's fun. 2025, and 2 plus 5 is 7. Never mind that 20 thing. How fun. Right? That if we go look for Uranus at this time, we're going to see Uranus here at the Pleiades. Okay, and let me move this thing a bit so we can see then that the Aries cusp, this east point of the Earth, of the tropical zodiac, this point that I would suggest speaks for the end of the beginning of the end of the beginning of the circle again, this place where the planes of year and day converge, right? Who do we see there but Saturn? And, well, we ought to see Neptune nearby, but it's pretty hard to see Neptune, you know? Maybe I have to do a little search. There you go. I'm remembering. I'm going to do a little bit of this. I'm thinking I save that setting while I'm at it. So, I mean, Neptune and Saturn is so close at that time that if I like supersize the planets, it looks like an occultation. It's not one, but here they are. And then I've got to search for Pluto, who at that time is somewhat close to the ecliptic because Pluto keeps his south node in Capricorn like Saturn and Jupiter do. And so you get this Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus symmetry around the equinox points. Hopefully that was on your screen. The screen share seemed a little bit weird. Just in case it wasn't, I'm going to bring that back. Here's Saturn. Neptune's very close. Uranus here with the Pleiades. And then Pluto. Where are you, Professor? Pluto here at the face of the goat. Tropical Aquarius. The horns of the goat in our day and age are like 4 degrees tropical Aquarius. So we get Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, who Venus will be visiting at that time at the Pleiades, forming this amazing symmetry, this sexy trine around the equinox point. All right. But let's go back to today. And at that equinox point, we find Saturn, we find Neptune, and at the north point, the north solstice point, we find Jupiter. Now, if we go back a few years or 3.5 years to December solstice 2020, we get to find that Saturn and Jupiter conjoined, and they were so close. Some people were calling this the Christmas star, you'll remember, right? I mean, it was a near occultation. It was not an occultation. I'll show you a picture that I took. I was in Sedona at the time. Let me search Jupiter Saturn here. Yeah, I mean, I had to try to find a place where they would look cool. I was down there for a week or something, and the place I found was here in Cathedral Rock. This tree is lit up, by the way, for like Christmas time. There were some other photos. I gotta find that photos from that day because I got some with like Christmas lights on trees and stuff, which felt fun because people were calling this really strong Jupiter, the bigger, brighter one, Saturn, conjunction, quote unquote, the Christmas star, and wondering if that had something to do with the Star of Bethlehem and whatnot, right? But they were so close. It's kind of like what we want our conjunctions to be. Sometimes they're like this, and you're like, "What? That's the conjunction you're selling me? Well, I want occultation, And it was that way for Jupiter, Saturn, and so importantly, as we know, the first degree of tropical Aquarius. And with Pluto transiting that point now some feel like this is the image of the dawning of the Age of Aquarius, and maybe there's a resonance, but the dawning of the Age of Aquarius is about following the east point of Earth through either the constellations or through sidereal signs. So I'm so driven, compelled, ordered to share how that works. And to do that, we really need to understand the power of the constellational zodiacs, sidereal zodiacs. We might have to pick one or many and compare. And the very beautiful and elegant and simple, entirely real astronomy, earth astronomy of the tropical zodiac, and looking at these frameworks of the 12-tooth gear of the terrestrial mechanism and the 12-tooth gear of the celestial mechanism. And when you hear me say that, you might hear that I prefer working with the sidereal rather than the constellational zodiac so equal dashes around that celestial clock face. And as we see, maybe I could say like the hands of Earth moving through that celestial clock face, we understand more about the turning of the ages and this spawning of the Age of Aquarius as we move from the early spawn degrees of the Pisces to the latter degrees of the Aquarian mysteries. And this isn't tropical zodiac, that would be sidereal, okay? So I hope you'll join me for that course. If you're interested in it, please join my mailing list, GeminiBrett.com. Of course, I'll be here promoting it in future storytelling hours. So if you join me on these Wednesdays, you'll get to hear more about that too. And if you're in constellations, you'll not only get to hear about it, but you'll get a significant discount. Because I got to eat, but I'm also compelled or driven or ordered to share these mysteries, and I really want to get the word out there, okay? And I love supporting the soul fam that supports me. So if you want to learn more about constellations, GeminiBrett.com, click the constellations link. You'll find a donation button there too if you want to buy me some tea. It helps the world go around for the teachings. And you'll find a place there where you can book a session with me. If you want to tune into your stars, maybe the interface of your terrestrial, tropical, celestial, sidereal, constellational. For me, I like to work with the mysteries of the tropical signs and constellational expression, and from many different cultural views. like for me, maybe the most interesting thing about Jupiter right now is that Jupiter is in the very center of the sacred hoop. So on the hand of the high man, absolutely. And in summer solstice, or I should say Cancer solstice, or let's speak directionally north solstice times, in our day and age, Orion's eating these or holding these like solar snow cones. It's the coolest thing. All right. But right now, Jupiter has just moved across that gateway, right, into Cancer and said to be a place where Jupiter's exalted. Well, I open this to show you that again, from the images of a very different star lore, the Lakota mysteries, this is the center of the sacred hoop of stars. And we're told that this is where our souls come from, and that this is the Inipi in the heavens, where our souls will go when we die to be purified, the sweat lodge of the sky, to then walk the spirit road, which is the Milky Way, to this place that sets in the southwest, which must be the Golden Gate, the other side, Galactic Center. And all of that wants to come through in this course I'm called to share with you. But I called this thing Jupiter and Cancer square Saturn and Aries, and maybe you were expecting some of that astrology. In a way, we were driven on course by this comment that adamantly suggests or says that Jupiter is in Gemini, not Cancer. But on course too, because that's right at the heart of this course that I want to share. And, is Jupiter in Gemini? Sure, he's at the foot of the twins. And in many sidereal zodiacs, Jupiter in sidereal Gemini now and won't be in Cancer until next year. Certainly won't be in the Crab constellation until then, but Crab constellation, Cancer sign, very different thing. And Jupiter has reached this point that is most north of the equator, which is called, as far as the most northern bounds of the zodiac, the heart of the zodiac, the sun's path, the ecliptic, the northern bounds is the Tropic of Cancer. Now, can you see why Jupiter would be exalted from the northern hemisphere point of view? The highest place of the zodiac might have to do with Jupiter's north node in Cancer, tropical Cancer as well, for this is where Jupiter now crosses the circle of spirit, the sun's path, heading on an ascensional trip from a northern hemisphere point of view, but also what comes up must go down. So from the southern hemisphere point of view, Jupiter's now coming closer to the ground and is very low in the heavens, where for the northern hemisphere, Jupiter very high. Right, globally speaking, very north. Like so many sacred systems of ancient wisdom traditions, the tropical zodiac is directionally aligned. In fact, I would suggest the energies of its signs are not seasonally, but rather directionally defined. So Jupiter coming to this place, Cancer, where he's said to be exalted, specifically at the 15th degree, interestingly, the ascendant degree of the Thema Mundi, the chart of the world soul, given to us by Hermes to reveal the code. And Jupiter will reach that exalted degree later this year. So Jupiter in this way, leaving Gemini, which because opposite his Sagittarian home, is said to be a place where Jupiter is in exile on the other side of the world, right? And now Jupiter coming from there into a place where he's said to be the honored guest of the moon, for she is the landlady, the domicile lady of Cancer, yeah? And why would the moon be the lady of Cancer? Wait, that's where we get the solstice sun. Well, every month the moon gets highest in our sky. And in a time when the north node is at 0 Aries, tropical, not constellational, not sidereal, we have the lunar maximums. In the southern hemisphere tonight, you have the opportunity with a significant out of bounds Capricorn moon to see one of the highest moons you'll ever see. And in the northern hemisphere, that moon will be as close to the ground as she can be. So what the sun does in a year on the horizons or in the heavens, the moon does every month. And that monthly energy experienced through the tides is twice as influenced by the moon as by that light of day called sun. The tides, which walk sideways, like the crabs who there reside in this glyph, we see clearly tropical astronomy. And this is not me saying that sidereal is wrong or constellational is wrong. I love them all, and we need it all to show this interface of the turning of the age. But for those who ridicule the tropical zodiac as something fake, you're just uneducated. And if you'd like to learn, I'm here for you. Right. So, I want to talk about this a little bit. Thank you, Winner. From the earth to the air, to the water, to the fire. What? And what Winner's revealing here is that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions move in this way, which will be familiar to many. Let's just call it like Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, or Aquarius. Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, right? This zodiacal order of elements, which is kind of strange, right? It has nothing to do with like density. Earth being the most dense, which holds the water in check, right? Keeps that the water will take the form of the cup. So does the air, right? But the air will also rise to the place that is most volatile, less fixed, right? The fiery place of the heavens. So there's many ways that we can take elemental order that make more sense. And in some traditions, as you know, 5 rather than 4 better show the trip. But in our tropical zodiac, we have this interesting thing where we move from, I won't teach all of temperament here, but let me just say, from the earth, cold and dry, to the air, hot and moist. All right. Now there's from there, from the air to the water, hot and moist to cold and moist. But then from the water to the fire, cold and moist to hot and dry. From the fire to the air, from the fire to the earth, hot and dry to cold and dry. They share dryness, right? From the water to from the air to the water, hot and moist to cold and moist. They share moisture, wetness. But we have these two places where there's what we call an opposition in the square of opposites, from earth, cold and dry, to air, hot and wet, or from water, cold and wet, to fire, hot and dry. There's nothing in common. There's like a crazy like shift. And perhaps this is happening now in modern times, right? Because we're moving in the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions from this epoch of about 200 years of Earth, with kind of a remembrance of that in 2000, and a commitment now to the air. The Libra conjunction in 81, look, the internet, personal computers and such, right? The Aquarius conjunction in 2020, and now AI and all the things. And we're us being able to connect through the space beams and share about the dawning of the Age of Aquarius, with amazing softwares that help to get the expression across. Oh, Winter says, unfortunately, the symbols aren't showing up on the video. Interesting. It's showing up in the chat here. But regardless, as you can fill in the blanks, Winter had drawn the earth glyph going to the air glyph, going to the water glyph, going to the fire glyph, the earth, air, water, fire, right? So when we have a very important square like this, Jupiter-Saturn square, right? It's like Jupiter has this, in a way, like it's not a homecoming into Cancer, right? Jupiter's homes are Sagittarius and Pisces, but he's got a key. Like he's an honored guest. That's the exalted expression of the moon in Cancer, right? And interestingly, tonight Moon will oppose Jupiter, right? But then Moon in a couple of weeks will come home. In fact, we're going to have a Cancer new moon conjunct Jupiter, which is amazing. And of course, like Jupiter and Mercury are hanging out in Cancer now, but kind of invisibly so under the beams of the sun. Mercury's just about to pop out. Maybe we'll see him from the stone circle this evening. But what happened with Jupiter as soon as he comes into Cancer? Square Saturn, right? Square Neptune. And so when we see this very important phases in cycles, like a square moon, for example, or a full moon, we want to rewind back when that moon is full to where the seed was planted at new moon time, which interesting was conjunct Mercury, right? When we look at this square that's coming very soon to a theater called U of Jupiter now in Cancer, squaring this Aries Saturn, right? Where Saturn is not said to be an honored guest. That's said to happen on the other side of the world in Libra. So this is where Saturn's said to be in fall, right? So there's an interesting kind of story of reception and such here. And I might look to Saturn and Mars, and I might look to Jupiter and the moon. But anyway, this is June 15th, where Saturn will perfect the first of these squares. Sorry, Jupiter will perfect the first of these squares with Saturn. And I hesitate because I want to remember if that's true, and it's not. Jupiter squared Saturn twice already from Gemini, Saturn then in Pisces. And this is the third of 3 of these Jupiter-Saturn squares, now in Cancer Saturn. So it's like the stage has been set for this. And we want to reference the point where the two of them conjoined, which we went back to and saw from Cathedral Rock and in the heavens, right? This is like at the horns of the sea goat, in the place that Pluto has been transiting recently, right? So this very first degree of tropical Aquarius, December 21st, 2020. So as we're looking at this tension, if you will, between Cancer water and Aries fire, and maybe especially tense for Saturn, if according to the ancient code, and not tense for Jupiter and water. Jupiter is a very connective being, right? He likes that moisture. Well, that's an interesting part of their tale, but we can ask also, what does a Cancer Jupiter square Aries Saturn have to say about the sprouting of the seed that they planted in Aquarius in 2020? With Saturn now sextile at that point, and Jupiter quincunx or inconjunct that point. I meant to spend some more time there today, but let's just wrap that here. We have plenty of time to be in this space. Let me give one other clue, and maybe we take this even further next week, or you're all astrologers, take this one further. Let's speak about it tonight for those of you who come out to the stones. Let's also look back to the time when Jupiter conjoined Neptune. And that brings us back to 2009. And interestingly, this also aligned thrice. I shouldn't say also thrice, but aligned thrice also in the sign of Aquarius. And in fact, we had this one that I wanted to show you, which was a Jupiter Chiron Neptune in Aquarius, 2009. So what is when we look now at Jupiter square Neptune, which itself is kind of like this sprouting, I don't really quite go there. So let's go Jupiter square Neptune. The reason why I say that is Jupiter will square Neptune like he did in 2012. Right, I'm just flailing, and many of you would have caught this already. My bad. 2022. and I knew this. I saw this. Actually went to celebrate, as I'm sure many of you did, when Venus and Jupiter and Neptune were all together some days after that thing, near the exalted degree of Venus in 2022. I was in Tucson at the Organization for Professional Astrology event, and we had a gathering before sunrise in the desert and looking for Venus and Jupiter to rise. Of course, we can't see Neptune with the naked eye, right? And a like amazing shooting star blazed the trail, and everybody, woo! It was so good. So what is it? Let's be there. What is it that now the Cancer Jupiter square Aries Neptune? How is that a sprout of a seed that was planted in Pisces in 2022? How is the Cancer Jupiter square Aries Saturn a sprouting of a seed that was planted in Aquarius in 2020? And for us to explore that, we really need to be with, well, what is Jupiter? What is Saturn? What is Jupiter? What is Neptune? What is Jupiter? What is Saturn, right? Saturn Neptune conjunction. How is it that as they're gathering at this crucial imperative point of the heavens, where the earth direction from the heart of earth, like east direction from the heart of earth, points, how is the complex of the square wanting to demonstrate in inside, outside? What is sprouting? So I wish I had answers to that question. What I have is that question. And I offer to you that question. And I ask that we all explore it together. In that spirit, I believe I got to check in with Mama about the baby. It's a little harder to just on a whim commit as I once did. But for those of us in constellations, I think I'll do a pop-up community discussion this Saturday that will really be tuned to that exploration. Let's also, because we'll have some time in this stew here at Storytelling Hour, get back to retrograde back to this Jupiter-Saturn thing. Maybe I'll try to do part 2 next week. Which will be closer, of course, to their conjunction, perhaps even than this one is. Maybe not. Well, I guess the conjunction will be at the midpoints because it's on Sunday, the day of the sun, June 15th, between Wednesdays. So let's make this part 1. And then hopefully I will have taken this vision of this turning of the ages course and brought it even more down to earth, brought it more into form, so I can tell you when and where it will be and how you can get on board. Thanks for spending some time with me, friends. More time than I thought it would be, but of course that's how it always is. I'm blessed by the present of your presence. It really helps this channel when you like this video, subscribe, share it around. So I very much appreciate it if you would, and when you do. And please consider checking out Constellations at the School of Earth Astrology. You can just click the Constellations tab at GeminiBrett.com. When you do, make sure to use the coupon code STARFAM. One word, doesn't matter if you use caps or not. So it can be STARFAM or STARFAM, right? STARFAM, and you'll get a good discount when you sign up either monthly or if you just want to fully commit and save a few annually. And we'll see you there in Constellations. For those of you in Constellations, know that my partner Scorpiana will be guiding a coaching circle around moon safety, self-care this Thursday, tomorrow, Jupiter's Day at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And then a week from them, next Thursday, I'll be leading our Earth Astrology deep dive where we explore these mysteries through the tunes of musical harmony, of sacred geometry, of number magic, of astrology, and much, much more. So thanks for being here. Thanks for those wonderful quotes that are coming in. Morgana, I keep seeing your name, and I'm like, we should hang out. For those of you who will be at the Stone Circle today, Winter, I know I'll see you there. I'll just say I'm in Berkeley. I'm not far from it. The sky right now is totally clear. And the weather app says it's staying that way. And I'm feeling wind, so do know to wear layers because it can be quite windy down in that space. All right. See ya in orbit, friends. Eyes to the sky.